Hi, everybody. I am Vara Raturi. I am from India. I'm new to nuclear risk studies. I've only done one more similar fellowship where I also investigated India-Pakistan nuclear stuff. But my background is that I have a BA in literature and philosophy and another BA in psychology. But I realized that all the things that I'm studying are related to South Asia, mostly India. So now I'm doing a master's in South Asian studies soon. And in this project, I am trying to understand how realistically possible it is that an India-Pakistan nuclear war breaks out in the foreseeable future. These are my research questions. So basically, I chose this project because even though I wasn't involved in nuclear risk research before, I could see that there's like loose talk about nuclear war in India in media. People were talking about it very loosely and aggressively. Every time it came to Pakistan, the tone would be very aggressive. And the Indian defense minister made a statement that, oh, we have a nuclear no first use policy, but don't take it too seriously. We might change it if such an outcome is desired. And Pakistan already has a first use policy. So I was a little worried about that. And then, and then it's considered one of the most likely nuclear situations because they have, India and Pakistan have years of like rivalry and mutual adversity since their creation as modern states after British India got divided. Then the impact of it is pretty bad. India and Pakistan both have between 130 to 150 nuclear weapons, and Toon et al. Did a study in 2019, and they showed that even a limited nuclear war between them would have long-term impact. In like direct impact itself is pretty bad, and I'm really concerned about that. And then in the long term, through nuclear winter as well, it could have even worse impact because it would impact agriculture and food. So that's the reason why I chose this topic. My major research questions for this is how likely is it that India-Pakistan nuclear war happens in the foreseeable future? What are the most likely pathways to this? And if this does happen, will it stay limited? Can it stay limited to India and Pakistan? So my mentor, Dr. Rishi Paul, suggested that I do this through the methodology of creating 4 scenarios that I think are most plausible that could lead to nuclear war at all. And I've been doing this through a lot of reading and also talking to lots of experts and scholars on the field. So my work is still in progress because a lot of the scholars I wanted to interview are not available until a certain period. So it's still, my opinions on certain scenarios are still half formed because I'm waiting to hear from the other scholars and get their opinion into my research as well. But basically, I'm trying to build these 4 scenarios and try to understand what this can happen. My first scenario is accidental misfire during a crisis, which is considered most likely by most experts, and inadvertent nuclear war, which means that nuclear war begins almost as a mistake because one party thinks that it is being attacked and then starts a nuclear war preemptively. That's one of the routes that could lead to inadvertent nuclear war, which is not, it's not decided, it's not deliberate nuclear war, but it's not even completely a mistake. So it's some kind of confusion cause that leads to nuclear war. And this is what experts and most people are worried about. This is my first scenario summary. So it seems like a perfect storm of things needs to happen for something like this to happen, but looking at history in India and Pakistan and how things happen, this is quite normal, and this is how things take over and escalation happens in a frenzy, and there's no escalation ladder, step 1 to step 2, that really gets followed, and things are so confusing that anything can happen. And based on past experiences and events between India and Pakistan, this is my first scenario. So ceasefire violations at the India-Pakistan border are quite common, and they usually start a conflict / a crisis between India and Pakistan. So this scenario starts with that, and then it leads to casualties on both sides. And what's been happening recently is that if there are casualties on both sides, especially like if there are Jawans that have been murdered, then the news gets in and the news media makes it very aggressive, and there's public outrage, and there's more pressure on leaders to do something to get back at Pakistan and take some proper action. So there's rising tension and high rhetoric in India and Pakistan. And now when such a high tension is being created, then Pakistan has a system where the military has a lot of say in the nuclear matters, whereas India, it's mostly civilian authority, but Pakistan has a lot of military authority that goes into decision making. And there have been a few military leaders who have mentioned that they might want to give battlefield commanders pre-delegated authority in times of a crisis so that they get to decide if they think there's a nuclear war coming towards them, then they can make the decision right there. And what makes this different is that India and Pakistan share a border. They're geographically so close that decision times and missile flight times from India to Pakistan or Pakistan to India are so short that decisions need to be made a lot quicker than, say, if it was a US-Russia scenario. So Pakistani military presses for field commanders to get pre-delegated authority. There's confusion about this. And at the same time, there's an accidental misfire of a conventional missile from India. This seems far-fetched, but this recently happened in April 2022. India accidentally misfired a conventional missile to Pakistan, did not inform Pakistani authorities that this was a mistake, but because the relations at the time were more peaceful than usual, it didn't escalate. So we're lucky that it did not escalate, because Pakistani and Indian interceptors can't really tell if something is a nuclear missile or a conventional missile, because Pakistan and India also use dual-use machines and systems. So basically their missiles could be carrying a nuclear warhead or a conventional missile. Now, thinking that the missile coming from India is a nuclear one, the Pakistani field commander launches a nuclear missile, and India may choose to respond then with a nuclear strike or not. But this is where my first scenario comes up to. And from this, I've got some key takeaways. First step for anything to do with nuclear war in the South Asian region is that India and Pakistan relations need to be made better, and we need to keep trying to initiate dialogue. There are some academics who've suggested a pilot program between academics from both countries as a starter. So there are lots of ideas about how to do this, but there's a political will that's lacking in both countries. So somehow we need to find out how to do that. Secondly, better communication norms are required between India and Pakistan. They do have hotlines between each other for exactly these scenarios, but they don't seem to be using it. So some people have suggested that they build communication centers, or like US and the Soviet Union did during the Cold War, which might be easier for them to communicate in case there's a misfire or an accident. Okay, now political leaders and news media, they always just aggravate the crisis instead of trying to advocate for peace. So they need to take more responsibility, and media especially, there needs to be a way to try to filter the kind of language that they're using in times of crisis. And prioritizing the improvement of India and Pakistan's interceptor technology so that they don't make the mistake of thinking that it's a nuclear missile when it could have been a conventional one. My second scenario is escalation due to disinformation or misinformation. This is slightly less likely and more likely to lead to conventional escalation, because it seems like both India and Pakistan do not want to escalate to nuclear, which is a good thing. So, but what happens is that disinformation, there's a definition right there, which is false information that is created and spread deliberately or otherwise to harm people, institutions, and interests. So disinformation is deliberately created, and misinformation is something that might not be deliberately created, but it's wrong information that is being spread. And there's been a rise in this in both India and Pakistan, especially with social media. And then news channels have been picking up the news, which is wrong, and showing it on news media. So it keeps proliferating like that. And then it becomes hard to tell what's true or false. And now with rising technology like deep fakes and using doctored videos, what use could that be put to create disinformation? That's a little worrying. So this is my second scenario. This is an example of Indian TV news during the Pulwama crisis, which is the last crisis between India and Pakistan, where there were airstrikes and there was terrorist activity, and it got pretty tense. And if you see, like, the headlines are like, "We will never forget. How can we teach Pak an unforgettable lesson? 1 billion Indians roar revenge. Have we reached a point of no return as far as Pak policy is concerned?" And then there's more in Hindi, where Imran Khan is shown as a devil with the Pakistan flag behind him. So it's very aggravating. The media is kind of pushing the leaders to take more escalatory decisions. So this is harmful. I'm running low on time, so I won't elaborate on this, but basically that's the scenario of how it could possibly lead to escalation. pre-existing state of tension gets aggravated because of a doctored video shared as misinformation slash disinformation on social media. And then it could either lead to chaos caused inside India, religious violence, because Pakistan and India, the problem is also very religious. So inside India, there could be riots, which is pretty bad by itself. Then second, it could lead to instability between India and Pakistan, and nuclear saber rattling, which is, even if it doesn't lead to nuclear war directly, it creates a bad enough environment, and for future relations, it makes things worse. And third, which is the absolute worst case scenario, is when there's chaos and there's limited time and there's an intelligence failure, and it actually does lead to nuclear escalation. Key takeaways: social media platforms need to be more stringent with their policies about fake news, disinformation, misinformation. Increasing media literacy in South Asian public, because most of them, there's no proper media literacy, and that's one huge problem why they fall for fake news so easily. And more monitoring of use of harmful technology like deepfakes. And again, politicians and TV news anchors need to take more responsibility. My third scenario is nuclear terrorism. I'm still exploring this one. The good news is, in a nutshell, it looks unlikely, but it's to make sure that it remains unlikely, India and Pakistan need to create more strict nuclear security. Like the Nuclear Threat Initiative rated them as not very, in the list, they didn't do really well. Like they were in the lower end of the list of nuclear security. And that's kind of dangerous because Pakistan is also home to a lot of terrorist organizations. And these terrorist organizations have declared that they are pursuing weapons of mass destruction. The plan ahead is my fourth scenario. Just one more minute. My fourth scenario still needs to be explored, which is whether or not China will get involved with India at all, because their relations have not been so well recently. And is there any fear of nuclear use between China and India? Seems unlikely as of now, but I'm still going to talk to a few more experts about this and concretize my opinion about this. And need to finish the third scenario about nuclear terrorism, and then I'm going to publish the research as a policy report and also a simplified version on the EFI. That was my presentation. Thank you.